Hi everyone, today we are going to read a public document called Declaration of the Rights of the Child. And if you haven't, go ahead and pull up your answer document. I'm going to share my screen with you. So our learning targets for today, the first one, I can determine the meaning of unknown words as they are used in a text. And the second one, I can determine an author's point of view or purpose in a text and explain how it is conveyed in a text. So the first one we are going to be doing as we are reading, and we are actually going to learn some vocabulary strategies of what to do when we come across unknown words. We see our second learning target will be used as our end task of how can we take everything we read and learned today and apply it to identify and determine the author's purpose and explain how it is conveyed or shown throughout the text. So before we dive into our reading, we are going to start off with our first 5 question, and it is located under number 1 of your answer document. So go ahead and take 2 to 3 minutes, pause the video, and answer the question, what type of challenges do children face? Okay, now that you had a chance to answer the question, go ahead and read mine that I have placed here in the box, and go ahead and think to yourself, how is your answer similar or different? Can you relate to any of the topics that I wrote about in my response? Have you ever felt misunderstood, misguided, or maybe deemed irresponsible or untrustworthy by an adult? Okay, we're going to come back to this at the end to see if any of these types of challenges are addressed in our text today. So before we dive into our text today, we're going to learn a little bit about the United Nations. It is an international organization that is made up of 193 member states from around the world. And collectively, the 193 member states form the General Assembly. And the purpose of the General Assembly is to discuss, address, and make policies that protect fundamental human rights. And they also maintain global peace. One of the policies was to adopt and expand Eglantine Jebb's document, the Geneva Declaration of the Rights of the Child. So why are we learning about the United Nations? What's the purpose? Well, we see over here on our text that we're going to read today that the authors of this text or public document, Declaration of the Rights of the Child, is the United Nations General Assembly. So it's important that we keep in mind who wrote this document and who benefits from this document and why was this document written. So after we look at the title and the author and see if there's anything that we as a reader can learn from, we can move to the next part, which is the background information here. The background information can also be known as a purpose setting statement, and we see that a lot in like a TN Ready test. They'll have like 1 or 2 sentences before the story starts, and usually it's like an excerpt from a short story or a novel. Well, a lot of times we want to skip right through it and just get to reading, but we really need to stop and read it because it's going to reveal either context or an overview of this topic that you as a reader may not be familiar with. So right here, it's going to help us identify important facts. So let's go ahead and read this together. In the late 19th century, many countries began to officially recognize that children need special legal protection. The Declaration of the Rights of the Child, which was adopted by the United Nations in 1959, is the first major international agreement on children's rights. It was inspired by the original declaration written by Eglantine Jebb, a British activist. So let's go ahead and answer our first question over here. What information is provided to the reader? So I'm going to simply click on this comment, and it's going to have a place for me to write in my response. So go ahead and jot down what information is provided to the reader in this background information. So as you can see, I'm just writing in bullet points here because I'm picking out the major components and the main ideas. So when I'm thinking about a summary, what goes into the summary, I am looking for the key details. And notice that a summary does not have my personal opinions. So I'm not saying, well, I think that the children are, no. I'm looking for what is in the text that I am picking out, that I am stating that it's important. It's the main idea. So when I'm finished, I'm going to hit reply, and it's going to pop up underneath the initial question. So let's go ahead and scroll down to the actual text. So this is where the text begins. We read the background, now let's dive in now that we have a little bit more context. So notice here that we see lots of yellow. So I don't want you answering the question until you get to that highlighted word. So whenever you see your next question, what is it about? I can't answer it until I read the entire paragraph. So let's go ahead and read it together. The Declaration of the Rights of the Child to the end that he may have a happy childhood and enjoy for his own good and for the good of society the rights and freedoms herein set forth, and calls upon parents, upon men and women as individuals, and upon voluntary organizations, local authorities, and national governments to recognize these rights and strive for their observance by legislative and other measures progressively taken in accordance with the following principles. I want you to go ahead and jot down in the comment over here where it says, what is it about? What did we just read? Pick out the main ideas and the key details here in the comment on the right. Okay, now that you've had a chance to answer, what is it about? What key ideas did you take away from that section of the text? I said that children have protected rights for their own good as well as the good of society. So it is to benefit the child, but it's also to benefit the society as a whole. And it's important that everyone, parents, men, women, individuals, voluntary organizations, local authorities, national governments, all recognize that children have these rights. Now, do we know what the rights are yet? No. It says the following principles. So we're going to see next. So let's go ahead and read the next section. So I see our next question is going to be highlighted in yellow here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look of what it's asking me to do next. What is the meaning of this word? What clues are provided to help you define that word? So that's going to be a vocabulary question. So let's keep that in mind as we read our next section. The child shall enjoy all the rights set forth in this declaration. Every child, without any exception whatsoever, shall be entitled to these rights without distinction or discrimination on account of race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status, whether of himself or of his family. Let's go back and look at the vocab word. What is the meaning of the word entitled, and how do we know? Let's take a look at our Google Slides presentation. So when we look for the meaning of words that we don't know, we have to look and ask ourselves a couple of things. How does this word relate to the topic of this text? How does this fit in to what we are reading about overall? Sometimes we have to look at the base word. So what word do I see in here that I recognize? I see the word titled. What do I know about the meaning of the word titled, and how can I relate it to this text? Or you can look at your context clues. So sometimes it could be a restatement, sometimes it could be a synonym, an antonym, or an explanation. So I'm going to look at the sentence where the vocabulary word is. Go ahead and take a second and think, what is the meaning of entitled and how do you know? So go ahead and reply to the comment over here. So I use the method of looking at the base word and knowing that a titled is something that's established. So I'm going to infer that the word entitled means that they're given to kids and that all kids should have them without any exception. So this is given to all children. Let's go ahead and look at our next comment where it says family. Who is involved in this document? We see, based on this section of the text, that we see that every child is involved with the declaration. And if I even wanted to highlight, I could use my mouse and go up to this icon, and I could use blue. So we see that it is not certain children, but all, and is without exception whatsoever. All children are able or entitled to these rights. Now that you've had a chance to answer the question, what is the meaning of the word entitled? I want you to go ahead and look at my answer to see if we got to the same conclusion. So when I'm looking at the meaning of the word, I'm using the strategy of looking at the base word, and I see the word titled, and I know that means like established or given. So I can infer the meaning of entitled means that they should be given the rights no matter what, whether they deserved it or not. This is what all children should have no matter what. Let's go ahead and answer the next question, who is involved? So who's involved in this entire document up to this point? Go ahead and pause this video and take about 30 seconds to a minute to answer this question. So this is actually a great question of who is involved because we see it says every child without any exception, but then we also see words like his or himself or he. So we actually see that it is talking about all children here. When this document was written, he was considered the most dominant pronoun. So make sure you keep note of that. It's not just talking about boys, it's talking about all children. So as you scroll down, you'll notice that we have a couple questions left. I want you to read the rest of this document and answer the questions on your own. So take about 10 to 15 minutes, go ahead and pause the video and answer the questions. Now that you've read the rest of the document, answered your questions, I want you to look at number 2, and I want you to pause and take the time to connect yourself and your life to the rights that are presented in this document. You made it to the post-reading questions. We have 3 for you to answer. The first one asks you to identify 2 rights that are defined or described in this document. And if you want to take it to the next level, go ahead and explain why these rights are important or what the meaning of the rights are. Number 2, according to the document, what should children who are physically or mentally disabled given? I want you to use evidence from the text to support your answer. Now we get to our last question of our lesson, and it is, what is the author's purpose in this document? And if you think back to the beginning of this lesson, we said this question is going to be all about the learning target of identifying the author's purpose and explaining how it is conveyed in the text. So we asked ourselves 3 questions at the beginning of this lesson. Who wrote this document? Who benefits from this document? And why was this document written? We want to use those 3 guiding questions to answer our end task. So go ahead and take about 10 to 15 minutes to answer this last question. Now that you have your response, I want you to stop and reflect. I want you to highlight with your cursor your sentence or sentences where you have explained or answered the question, who wrote this document? And what I want you to do is to go up to the highlighter color and choose yellow, where you have answered that question. Now I want you to look at your response, and I want you to highlight with your cursor where you answered either a sentence or sentences of who benefits from this document. And I want you to highlight those sentence or sentences blue. Then our last part, why was this document written? I want you to highlight your answer with your cursor and highlight that green. If you were able to do all 3 of those things, you have properly answered our end task question. And now I want you to go back up to the top of your document about your first 5 questions. So now that you have read this text, I want you to reflect on the type of challenges that you wrote about in your first 5 questions. Did you learn anything, or maybe want to change your answer now that you've had time to soak in some new information? I hope this question stays with you throughout our upcoming lessons as we talk about growing up and triumphs and challenges that children experience. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you took away how you can determine the meaning of unknown words as they are used in the text, and how to identify the author's purpose in a text. I will see you in the next video.